Ukraine's Lazar's group, operating as part of Ukraine's National Guard, reported striking 18 Russian tanks in a single coordinated operation. A number like that commands attention. But the real weight of what happened lies not in the final count. It lies in the sequence of events that made 18 simultaneous tank strikes possible. And that sequence begins not with a weapon, but with patience. According to Ukrainian sources, the aerial reconnaissance element of Lazar's group spent a sustained period watching the routes used by Russian armor before the operation was executed. They tracked which roads the tanks used, where they stopped, how they formed up during movement, and when they were most exposed relative to terrain and support vehicles. This observation phase was not a rapid response to a sudden Russian movement. It was a deliberate intelligence-building effort designed to answer a specific question: when and where will these tanks be most vulnerable? The operation began long before the first drone was launched. It began the moment Ukrainian reconnaissance understood the pattern. That pattern is the most important tactical concept in modern armored warfare in Ukraine. A tank is designed to close with the enemy, provide protection to its crew, and deliver heavy firepower to a fixed position or moving target. Those capabilities are real. They are not diminished by the presence of drones, but they are contextual. A tank is dangerous when it appears at an unexpected location, when the defender has insufficient time to react, and when the armor provides effective protection against the weapons being used against it. When the route to that unexpected location is already known, when the defender has had days or weeks to prepare a response, and when the weapons being used are guided not by a gunner inside another vehicle, but by an operator watching a high-definition video feed from altitude, the tactical calculation changes fundamentally. A tank that uses the same road twice has established a pattern. A formation that stops at the same staging area creates a pattern. A column that moves with the same supporting vehicles in the same order leaves a pattern that is readable from above. Once Ukrainian reconnaissance understood the pattern around the targeted sector, the tanks were no longer vehicles moving toward a potential ambush. They were targets moving toward a prepared and confirmed ambush that had been organized around their own behavioral habits. Commander Dominik's team provided the targeting intelligence that allowed attack drones from Lazar's group to work in coordination with Ukrainian artillery against the identified vehicles. The coordination between drones and artillery is itself a force multiplier. A drone can strike a vehicle precisely, but its warhead is limited in size. Artillery can deliver heavier payloads across a wider area, but it benefits from precise coordinates rather than general areas. When reconnaissance identifies exact positions and attack drones either deliver initial strikes or provide terminal targeting data for artillery rounds, the combined effect exceeds what either system can achieve operating independently. The 18 strikes were not 18 separate decisions made in real time. They were the execution of a plan that had been constructed from the intelligence accumulated during the observation phase. For Russia, this creates a tactical problem with no straightforward solution. The tank's primary design advantages, armor, firepower, and mobility, are not well matched against an adversary that can watch the vehicle from the moment it leaves its covered position until the moment it becomes a target. Mobility, which is supposed to give armor the ability to appear at unexpected locations, becomes less useful when the routes to those locations are already being observed. Armor, which is supposed to protect the crew from incoming fire, provides less protection against a guided weapon that can be directed toward the vehicle's weakest points. Firepower, which is supposed to allow the tank to suppress and destroy enemy positions, requires the tank to reach a position where it can be used, and reaching that position now requires surviving a surveillance and strike environment that the vehicle was not designed to defeat. The operation around Sloviansk demonstrates that this is not an isolated technique applied in a single sector. The 81st Air Assault Brigade and the 7th Air Assault Corps reported subsequent strikes in the same wider pattern. 2 Russian tanks and an ammunition depot in the Sloviansk area. The smaller number in this report is less significant than what it indicates about the operational approach. Ukraine is attempting to maintain continuous pressure on Russian armored units in this sector, pursuing not just the tanks that appear at the front, but the support system that allows those tanks to operate. An ammunition depot struck behind the line reduces the artillery support available to the armored assault in front of it. 2 tanks destroyed in a follow-up operation are 2 vehicles that will not be available for the next assault attempt. Sloviansk sits inside a broader contest over movement, supply, and access to firing positions. A tank does not fight in isolation. It requires fuel to move, ammunition to fire, repair crews to address combat damage, safe roads to access the front line, infantry support to prevent close-range anti-armor attacks, and command links to coordinate with other elements of the assault. Each of these support functions requires movement and infrastructure that generates signatures, vehicles on roads, radio transmissions, supply convoys, assembly areas where units form before advancing. The more Russia tries to sustain pressure in the Sloviansk direction, the more of these signature-generating support activities it must conduct. And every signature-generating activity is a potential target for the Ukrainian surveillance network. Russian forces around Sloviansk are using the full range of available tools. Tanks provide shock and direct fire capability. Artillery attempts to break Ukrainian defensive positions and restrict movement behind the line. Drones search for Ukrainian infantry, vehicles, and supply routes. Mechanized units move soldiers forward when conditions allow a direct assault. Remote mining operations target roads that Ukrainian forces use for logistics and reinforcement. Each of these activities has military value. Each also creates the kind of observable activity that Ukrainian surveillance is specifically designed to exploit. An artillery battery that has found a firing position will return to that position, or to one nearby, because terrain suitable for concealed artillery is limited. A drone team that has established a control point in a building or vehicle will remain in that location between missions. A supply convoy that has found a route into the operational area will use that route again, because alternatives are less practical. The Russian effort to recover damaged equipment represents one of the most important and most dangerous elements of this operational picture for Moscow. A tank that has been disabled by a drone strike is not automatically a total loss. If the vehicle can be towed back to a repair facility, mechanics may be able to rebuild the engine, replace tracks, restore electronics, and return the platform to service. In a long war fought at the scale of the Ukraine conflict, the difference between losing a tank permanently and recovering it for repair represents a significant logistical and financial saving. Russia has maintained substantial recovery and repair capacity specifically because restoring damaged vehicles is more efficient than manufacturing replacements. Ukraine is targeting this recovery process directly. Recovery vehicles must move slowly, often along roads that have already been identified by Ukrainian reconnaissance as active logistics routes. They must stop in areas near the damaged equipment, areas that may still be under surveillance by the same drone networks that track the original assault. Repair teams working near the front line operate in exposed positions for extended periods, because recovery and initial repair operations are time-consuming. Security units assigned to protect the recovery effort must also be present in the same location. Each of these elements, the recovery vehicle, the repair team, the security escort, represents an additional target that appears as a direct consequence of the first strike. Open-source tracking of Russian equipment losses provides the broader context that explains why this recovery disruption strategy matters at the strategic level. More than 3,000 Russian tanks have been visually confirmed destroyed or captured since the war began. Approximately 8,000 infantry, fighting vehicles, and armored personnel carriers have been recorded as losses. Around 1,000 artillery systems have been confirmed destroyed. These figures represent only what has been documented with photographic or video evidence. The true total of damaged, destroyed, or abandoned equipment is almost certainly higher, because not every loss occurs in a location where drone footage or satellite imagery captures the evidence. The confirmed numbers represent a floor, not a ceiling. These accumulated losses create an organizational burden that extends from the front line to Russia's defense industrial base. Each lost tank represents not only a missing weapon, but a missing crew, a missing maintenance history, missing spare parts, and the accumulated combat experience that experienced crews develop over time. Replacing the vehicle through production or restoration addresses only one dimension of the loss. Replacing the crew requires training time that cannot be shortened without reducing combat effectiveness. Replacing the maintenance knowledge and spare parts ecosystem that supports a specific platform at the unit level requires the kind of logistical investment that becomes progressively harder as losses accumulate across multiple sectors simultaneously. Russia's defense industry has continued to function throughout the war, and this is an important fact that should not be understated. Moscow has demonstrated the ability to produce, repair, and restore conventional military equipment, tanks, armored vehicles, artillery systems, missiles, and drones at rates that have allowed Russian forces to sustain offensive pressure across the Eastern Front. Production facilities that were considered at risk of disruption early in the war have continued to operate. Older platforms pulled from storage have been returned to service in numbers that have partially offset battlefield losses. The more complex question is whether the equipment being restored and produced matches the quality of what has been lost. A newly manufactured tank, a tank restored from reserve storage, and a tank repaired from combat damage are all counted as one tank in raw inventory figures. In operational terms, they may offer substantially different capabilities. Modern sighting systems with thermal imaging allow crews to detect and engage targets at night and in poor visibility conditions that earlier generation optics cannot penetrate. Secure, encrypted communications reduce the vulnerability of command coordination to interception. Improved reactive and composite armor packages provide protection against guided anti-tank weapons that older armor configurations were not designed to defeat. Electronic warfare systems built into modern platforms help crews detect and potentially disrupt drone targeting.